I love bringing back Bearcats, and these two guys were former teammates of mine at Willamette University in Salem, and I was catching up with one of them who was telling me great things that the other one was doing, and then we just said, to hell with it. Let's all get on a hangout. So Seth Peck, Mark Newman are with me. Sethy, how are you?
I'm beautiful, man. How are you, Kippy?
I'm doing good. Seth and I were the ones at one of our other former teammates' 40th birthday party because we're all getting to that point where we're either 40 or closing in on 40. Mark Newman is also here with me. Mark, a.k.a. Dimage. Didn't think I'd remember that one, did you? Mark Newman, how are you, bud?
I am also 40, and I'm doing well in spite of it.
He always shot the ball. I don't know where he got that nickname.
Maybe he wanted to throw it to the rest of us and not you. That might have been the issue, Seth.
Yeah, I don't know which hand I was shooting with it. Okay.
Let's start here. And Seth, your class in 1999 at Willamette, yes?
Yes, sir.
2 years, and so we played 2 years together. Mark, 2000 or 2001?
2000. So
2000.
But I was only playing the last 2 years, so you could say we practiced for 2 years together.
So let's go here, Sethy. Give them where you're at currently, job title, which we'll get into how we got there. We'll start with Seth. Both you guys answer where you're at, family, city, current job title, and then we'll dive into the other good stuff. So Seth, you go first.
Okay, great. I'm an assistant principal at a Title I school up in Kelso, Washington. So probably about 2 hours north of Salem, where I went to school. So this is my third year at the school. And I live in Ridgefield with my wife, Megan, and we have 3 kids. Abigail and Rory are identical twins. They're 7. And then we have little Eli, little He-Man, who's 5. And he's entering in kindergarten next year. So,
Mark?
Yeah, I'm in Linfield City, also known as McMinnville.
Let's say Linfield on the podcast.
Sorry. I live here, 3 kids. My wife's actually from McMinnville, which is more random than why we're actually here. And we started a business here in 2012. So we're still kind of doing that, trying to figure that out. And yeah, loving life here.
So all of us we all have the trio of offspring, which some people would say, what in the hell were any of you thinking going to number 3? Yeah. And let me ask you this. How many times did you hear, you can't do the third child because that means you're not playing man-to-man, you're playing zone? How many times did you hear that one from some genius telling you about parenting?
Too many to count. Yeah, too many to count. We're outnumbered. We get it, but we're good with it.
Well, no one in either side of my family had twins. So, when we had identical twins, we were from the get-go, like.
Yeah. Do you guys have minivans? Do you guys have minivans? Because I drive one. I rock it, the Honda Odyssey.
I think Newman and I, before we were like married with kids, we always joked about getting in minivans together when we lived up near Seattle. But no, my wife, she's got one of those big Suburbans, and she calls it her mobile command center. So
we just traded ours in, so we're done with minivan land.
What? Is that because the kids are old enough and they can situate in a different setup?
I think it has to do with mom and what she wants to drive. I think that's more what drove that.
So, hey, let's get into graduation, maybe post-graduation. Tell everybody your guys' majors. We found out what you're doing now. Seth's in education. Mark is in changing the world science. Tell us your undergrad degree, and then Mark, let's start with you. What you did the first couple years with that when you got out of school, and then we'll go to Seth on the same thing.
Yeah, pretty much everyone on the team when I was there was a business major of some sort, and I was a chemistry major, so I was a little bit of an odd duck. So I got a chem major at Willamette, which was great, and then got a master's degree in forensic science. Which was interesting, but not all that useful, quite frankly. And then
stuff like when you say forensic science, I think CSI. Is that accurate? Or just
It's the whole forensics CSI. Hey, it's really interesting, but what it amounts to is you're either doing drug analysis or DNA analysis 40 hours a week, which is boring. So I ended up doing working in a clinical lab, doing hormone testing, which was actually pretty interesting, and then ended up kind of working on the side of things of like building different lab tests and things. Ended up 3 or 4 different places doing different types of technologies and things. And then this little lab space opened up in my wife's hometown of all places. And it was a pretty like weirdly providential, like door, God opens doors, kicks you in the rear and tells you you're going this way, like it or not kind of a thing. So I'm kind of entrepreneur by necessity, I guess. And so that was about 5 years ago. And so we've been doing that since. It's like hormone testing, so it's really interesting for me if you're the science nerdy type. It's kind of the application of science, which is what I struggled with in college, is what's the application of this crap, where's this going? And most of the stuff I dabbled in wasn't that interesting, but I thankfully fell into something that's really interesting, trying to put the puzzle together of what's going on with someone's hormones, and that might lead to whatever health issues or whatever. So
right. No, and I'm excited to dive into a lot of those moments you mentioned that led to that providence, where you're at and what you're doing. Sethy, were you a business econ guy too, and somehow you ended up saving the world's youth?
Yes, sir. I was a business econ major, and I over the next 4 or 5 years, I was kind of a tumbleweed. I was in sales, working for 3 or 4 different places. Didn't really, I used to always say I dread Sunday night, and I didn't want to go back to work.
Yeah.
And I had an aunt who kept bugging me, and she'd say, gosh, you got to go into education, Seth. You'd be good in it. And she worked on me. And after a couple of years, looked into it, and the state of Washington, because I grew up in Salem too, the state of Washington was actually paying people to become special education teachers, because no one's really crazy enough to do that.
Yeah. So
to me, it was recognizing that there are a lot of kids that come from tough backgrounds, tough situations, and what our educational system does is it puts them on, and puts a lot of them in special education. So what I did was I said, okay, I'm going to take the plunge, and I moved. I continued to work in Seattle, and I went to school in Vancouver and did an accelerated program to get my second BA, and then I got my master's in business leadership from Washington State, Vancouver, and did my principal internship about 5 years ago.
Last one before I let you guys go. It's been great. I'm gonna give you one different question for each of you. Mark, start with you. And at the risk of making you say a bunch of cliches, so feel free to give me something different. You don't have to give me the standard. What would you take from your background as an athlete that you think you still draw on? And it doesn't have to be, I learned this from Gordy James at Willamette University. It doesn't have to be that. It can just be a history of playing and being active that you still use day to day.
I think the flex offense really is probably the biggest thing. Yeah, and I think all those lessons I think are slow over time. And to me, I think if you could take what you've learned at 40 and apply them to that environment, like how healthy that would be to go into an environment where you have a bunch of alpha males that are really just like insecure ultimately. And you could apply some humility and some communication and like loving each other, which is something you learn to like actually be okay saying out loud by the time you turn 40, which is not really okay when you're, running around in the locker room with a bunch of 19-year-olds. I think that and I think some of those lessons get accelerated in athletics and just working hard and working together, for a common goal. But I think a lot of that stuff is just, we're so slow as humans to learn those things that when I look at those variables, I just see such slow progression, over time. And I think that's been a big part of that. But yeah, you just wish when you're 40 that, and for you, I'm probably even more so because you're staring at those kids that are that age. And I don't mean to be condescending to call them kids, but like if you could impart that growth onto them, like just how healthy that environment, could be and how much more you can accomplish. But those same lessons still catch us here, where people have egos and people have insecurities and they express themselves in different ways. And that's what I'm trying to learn over time, is how to like step into that with humility, but directness and to try to be, healthy in the way that we're addressing that. And I don't know if that really answers your question, but so I think those things, just seeing those progress in your life, and it's fun just talking to you and reflecting back on just, what an idiot I was at that age, and knowing that when I'm 60, I'll look back at my 40-year-old self and say, the same relative statement about where I'm at today. And eventually you kind of figure that out about yourself, you know, that
Right.
we're this growing in process thing. And that's a good thing, you know, and embrace that. And I wish I could have embraced that earlier, you know, because I think you could cover so much more ground if you can be more honest with yourself at those, you know, as a 20-year-old, you know.
Right. And so that's I'm glad you led with that, because it segues what I'm going to ask Seth. Seth, if you could go back to your 20-year-old, 21-year-old self, what's the main? You got 35 seconds to a minute with that Seth Peck from 1999. What does he need to know?
Keep shooting right-handed, man. I'm just kidding. Oh, geez. 35 seconds.
Well,
you know what?
I'll give you a coffee, but you have a coffee with your 21-year-old self.
I would say, stay the course, I mean, with what I did. I'm not, in terms of asking, I'm 40 years old. I'm sitting down with my 20-year-old self. My parents blessed me. I mean, they set me up really well in so many ways. I feel okay in terms of, I agree with pretty much everything Newman said. Life that's slow growing in process. I think as long as a person takes time to self-reflect and really think about who they are, why they're doing the things they are. Is it meeting goals with who you want to be? Is it, harmonious with your ideology or ideologies in life? I mean, if I sat down with myself, I would just ask myself a lot of why questions, really, like just kind of affirm myself with a lot of the things that I did. I remember, I think, Kippy, were you there when I think Gordy had to sit down and we had to write? I mean, he asked some why questions, and we had to give them to him. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Was that maybe your freshman year or your sophomore year?
I think it was freshman year, yeah.
Yeah, and I guarantee you that a lot of the things that I wrote in there, I remember talking to Coach Wing about it afterwards, I would be okay with how I answered some of those things. So, if I'm talking to other people versus myself, maybe that's a different story, but
no, that's perfect. That's probably love it.
Yeah.
Where, before you guys get out of here, how do listeners keep up with you? Either personal social medias or for the business, for the school? How do we stay up to date with how you guys are doing after you become famous because of Cross the Streams podcast?
Well, for me, now that I have the title, which I've been fighting for 5 years, now I can actually start to maybe put it to use for others. Yeah. So, like, Newman knows I'm already going to be coming to him for some donation money. He's just been waiting to hear from me. But, go to, you can find me at Wallace Elementary up in Kelso School District. I know, Kip, we had talked about you maybe coming up with a service project with the kids. I was talking to Fritzy out at Linfield. He's doing some work with rebranding companies. He's going to be coming up and giving us some work with Evan on things to do to help us. I think one of the cool things, I talked to my dad. So my old man, he was an athlete too. And he talks about how getting into his 40s and 50s, when you finally start re-meeting people, getting reacquainted with people who have become successful in whatever professional endeavors they've taken, you can use those experiences to help others. Absolutely. So he's just kind of saying, you're getting to the point, Seth, where maybe if you've treated people well and you bless them, they can bless back, but you're blessing others. It's not about you. So, so that's to awesome. Be determined. Yeah. So check that out and let Newman give his plug.
I assure you, most people will not want to follow what I'm putting out there, but my company is DutchTest.com. So like the people Dutch, DUTCH test.com. We have a blog, and most people do not find it interesting, but if you're into hormones and that sort of stuff,
I've got a couple teenagers on my team. That might dial in.
Oh, well, hey, if you got some chem majors, have them send a resume over when they're done. So we're hiring kids out of colleges like Willamette all the time. But I'm doing that. You cannot find me on Facebook or anything like that, so you will not be following me
here.
There. But you can find me playing old man basketball at the junior high 3 mornings a week if you want to keep up with me. So
I love it. Hey, Seth Peck, Mark Newman, former teammates of mine, doing amazing things. Guys, really appreciate you coming on the podcast.